So let's talk about this thing from the 1940s. Picture it, a perfect little sphere of plutonium, just 6.2 kilograms. It was created right at the dawn of the atomic age at Los Alamos. And it was supposed to be the heart of a third atomic bomb. But, it never actually made it into a weapon. Instead, it just stayed behind in the lab. And that's where its story gets really dark. It ended up taking the lives of two brilliant physicists and earning itself a seriously terrifying name. This is the story of the Demon Core, and it's really a tale of incredible scientific ambition, tragic human error, and a force that, once you let it out of the box, well, there's just no putting it back in. The funny thing is, the scientists who made it, they just called it Rufus. Yeah, Rufus, a simple, kind of friendly working name. But that's not what we call it today. We call it the Demon Core. So what on earth could happen in just 9 months to take it from Rufus to the Demon Core? Well, the answer is pretty terrifying. It's all about the incredibly dangerous work these guys were doing, basically balancing on a knife's edge, right on the verge of an uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction. Okay, so to really get what went so horribly wrong here, we have to talk about this invisible force they were messing with. The official name for these experiments was criticality procedures. Pretty dry, right? But honestly, a better name, considering the risks they were taking, would have been something more like waking the beast.
So here's the key thing you need to understand. By itself, that plutonium sphere was totally stable. It was subcritical, as they'd say. Think of it like a single person whispering in a huge empty room. Kind of lonely, right? Now, what these experiments did was surround the core with special materials that acted like mirrors, but for neutrons. They'd bounce the core's own neutrons right back at it. It's like adding more and more people to that room, and they're all whispering the exact same thing. And eventually, that whisper turns into a self-sustaining roar. Their whole goal was to get it right to the edge of that roar, that tipping point called criticality. But if you went just a tiny, tiny bit too far, you get a massive, silent, and absolutely lethal burst of radiation.
And the famous physicist Richard Feynman, he had the absolute perfect way to describe this work. He said it was like tickling the tail of a sleeping dragon. Just imagine that for a second. They knew exactly how much power they were dealing with, this incredible sleeping beast. And yet the whole procedure was to get right up close, by hand, and just poke it, just to see what would happen. It's wild. Well, that sleeping dragon, it woke up for the first time on the night of August 21st, 1945. And the person who woke it was a physicist named Harry Daghlian. He was working late, and he was working alone, which was a huge, huge violation of safety protocols. He was about to find out, in the most horrific way imaginable, exactly why those rules were in place. So here's what was happening. Daghlian was building this little wall, brick by brick, around the plutonium sphere. These were tungsten carbide bricks, and remember, each one acted like one of those neutron mirrors, pushing the core closer and closer to that critical edge. His instruments were practically screaming at him at this point, telling him that this last brick was going to be the one to push it over the top. As he moved to handle that final brick, his hand slipped, and that heavy brick just fell. It landed right on top of the whole assembly. And in that one instant, the whole room just lit up with this eerie, ghostly blue flash. That blue light, that's the signature of a criticality event. It's the air itself being ripped apart, ionized by a massive burst of gamma rays and neutrons. In a total panic, Daghlian managed to knock the brick away, and that stopped the reaction. But it was already too late. In that single fraction of a second, the damage was done. He only survived for 25 days. His death was this incredibly painful, agonizing decline from what we call acute radiation poisoning. It was a stark, brutal warning of the invisible killer they were handling every day. And yet, the experiments didn't stop. Okay, so fast forward 9 months later. The dragon stirs again. And this time, the tragedy centers on a man named Louis Slotin. He was the lab's chief bomb assembler, a brilliant physicist, no doubt. But he was also known for being incredibly daring, almost reckless. He had this reputation as a cowboy, and he was about to perform his favorite party trick, so to speak. So it's May 21st, 1946, and Slotin is showing off the procedure to 7 of his colleagues. Now, instead of carefully stacking bricks like Daghlian, his technique was a little different. He would lower a beryllium dome, which is an extremely effective neutron reflector, down over the core. The official safety rules said you had to use these little things called shims to make sure the dome couldn't close all the way. But Slotin, His method was to hold the gap open with nothing more than the tip of a regular old flathead screwdriver. And then, you guessed it, the screwdriver slipped. The beryllium shell dropped completely, and there it was again, that same ghostly blue flash, a sudden wave of heat. The core went prompt critical in an instant, but in a moment of pure raw reflex, Slotin lunged forward, and he ripped that heavy dome off with his bare hands. In doing that, he absorbed the absolute worst of the radiation, but he saved the lives of the other 7 men in that room. And he knew, instantly, what had just happened to him. As he was walking out of the lab, he turned to a colleague and said, with this just bone-chilling calm, "Well, that does it." I mean, it's just horrifying how similar these two accidents were. You've got 2 different physicists, 2 totally different methods, but it all comes down to the exact same mistake, a simple slip of the hand. And Slotin, because he was closer and that beryllium reflector was so much more efficient, he received a dose that was way, way higher. He would only survive for 9 days. So what does it actually mean to get a fatal dose of radiation like this? I mean, it's not like a burn you get from fire. It's something else entirely. The doctors who treated Louis Slotin actually described it as a 3-dimensional sunburn. Think about that. A burn that's happening from the inside of your body out. It's happening on a cellular level. What they were suffering from is called acute radiation syndrome, or ARS, and it's basically a complete systematic breakdown of your body. Those high-energy neutrons, they act like trillions of microscopic bullets just tearing through your cells, shattering your DNA. And here's the really cruel part. After the initial shock and sickness, there's this weird, deceptive period where the person actually starts to feel better. They call it the walking ghost phase. But it's an illusion, because internally, their cells have lost the ability to divide, to replicate. All of the body systems, your immune system, your digestive tract, they just fall apart. The death of Louis Slotin, especially since it was witnessed by 7 other scientists, was a shockwave that just couldn't be ignored. It was the brutal, undeniable end of an era. The days of tickling the dragon's tail by hand, yeah, those were over. For good. And the change was profound. And it was immediate. That whole cowboy era of doing things by hand, of using a screwdriver as your main safety device, that was gone overnight. From that point forward, all criticality experiments were done using remote control. Scientists operated machines from safely behind thick shields of concrete and leaded glass. The culture of scientific bravado was completely replaced by one of extreme caution. So what happened to the core itself? Well, Rufus, the object at the heart of these 2 horrific deaths, was basically seen as cursed. It was too hot, too unlucky for anyone to handle. It was actually scheduled to be used in the Operation Crossroads nuclear tests, but after Slotin died, they scrapped those plans. The demon core was just quietly melted down. Its plutonium was recycled and used in other nuclear projects, and it was gone. So in the end, you have to ask, was the core really a demon? Of course not. It was just a piece of metal, you know? It was behaving exactly the way the laws of physics said it would. The real demon in this story, that was human hubris. It was the belief that this fundamental power of the universe, the same energy that fuels the stars, could be safely controlled by the steady hand of a scientist holding a screwdriver. The story of the demon core is this permanent, chilling reminder that when you're dealing with that kind of power, there is absolutely zero room for a slip of the hand.